I'm Sarah, and I'm 32 years old. For most of my life, I believed my family loved me equally, that the small differences in treatment were just coincidences or misunderstandings. I thought my mother giving my sister Emma her wedding ring while selling mine without asking was just a practical decision. I thought the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms were normal family dynamics. But what I overheard them saying behind my back 3 months ago shattered every assumption I had about my place in this family, and what happened next changed everything forever. If you've ever felt like the family scapegoat, like you're constantly fighting for scraps of love and recognition while watching others get everything handed to them, this story is for you. Because what I discovered about my family's true feelings toward me led to the most painful yet liberating confrontation of my life. Let me start from the beginning, because the wedding ring incident wasn't isolated. It was part of a pattern I'd been blind to for decades. Growing up, I was the middle child between Emma, who's 3 years older, and my brother Jake, who's 4 years younger. Emma was always the golden child, the pretty one, the social one, the one who made friends easily and never seemed to struggle with anything. She breezed through high school, got into a decent college with average grades, and landed a marketing job at our dad's friend's company right after graduation. Everything seemed to fall into place for her effortlessly. I, on the other hand, was the awkward one. I had thick glasses, struggled with social anxiety, and threw myself into academics because it was the one area where I felt I could excel. While Emma was going to parties and dating, I was studying for advanced placement classes and spending summers at academic camps. My parents always said they were proud of my grades, but I noticed they lit up differently when talking about Emma's social successes or Jake's athletic achievements. The pattern became clearer during college selection. Emma wanted to go to State University, which cost about $28,000 a year. My parents didn't hesitate to commit to paying her full tuition and living expenses. When my turn came, I had been accepted to Northwestern with a partial academic scholarship that would still require about $35,000 annually from the family. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with my acceptance letter, so excited to share the news about getting into such a prestigious school. My mother looked at the financial breakdown and immediately started talking about community college for the first 2 years to save money. She said it would be more practical, more responsible. I pointed out that Northwestern was ranked significantly higher than State University and that my partial scholarship showed the school really wanted me there. My father said rankings weren't everything and that Emma was doing just fine at State. I ended up going to Northwestern anyway, but I took out significant student loans to cover what my parents wouldn't pay. I worked 2 part-time jobs throughout college and graduated summa cum laude with a degree in biomedical engineering. Emma graduated with a communications degree and a 3.2 GPA. At both graduation ceremonies, I noticed my parents' reactions. At Emma's graduation, they threw a big family party, invited extended relatives, and my mother spent weeks planning every detail. At mine, we went to dinner at a nice restaurant with just immediate family. After college, I moved to Chicago for a research position at a pharmaceutical company. I was making good money finally, and starting to pay off those student loans aggressively. Emma moved back home and started her marketing job, which paid well enough but required no advanced degree or specialized skills. Jake was finishing high school and showing promise as a baseball player. The first major red flag I should have caught was during my grandmother's illness 3 years ago. Grandma Rose had always been special to me. She was the one who encouraged my academic pursuits and never made me feel like I was too serious or too focused on school. When she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, I immediately started driving the 4 hours from Chicago to my hometown every weekend to help with her care. I researched treatment options, coordinated with her doctors, and spent countless hours at her bedside. Emma visited occasionally, usually for Sunday dinners that turned into social events with other family members. Jake was busy with baseball season. But somehow, in all the family conversations about Grandma's care, my contributions were minimized while Emma's brief visits were praised as being so meaningful and emotionally supportive. When Grandma Rose passed away, she left behind some jewelry and a small savings account of about $15,000. The jewelry was distributed among the granddaughters. Emma got the pearl necklace and matching earrings that had been Grandma's wedding set, along with a beautiful sapphire ring. I received a simple gold bracelet and a small brooch. My mother explained that Emma had always admired the pearls, and the sapphire ring complemented her coloring better. But it was Grandma Rose's own wedding ring that would later become the center of everything that unraveled my family. Grandma Rose's wedding ring was a stunning 1940s Art Deco piece with a central diamond surrounded by smaller stones in an intricate platinum setting. It had been in our family for 3 generations, passed down from my great-grandmother to my grandmother, and everyone assumed it would eventually go to my mother. When my mother inherited it, I thought that would be the end of the story. But my mother surprised everyone by announcing that she wanted to give the ring to one of her daughters when they got engaged, continuing the family tradition. Emma got engaged first, about 2 years after Grandma's death. Her boyfriend David proposed with a modern ring he'd chosen himself, a beautiful solitaire that cost him nearly $8,000, according to Emma's excited reports to anyone who would listen. When my mother offered Grandma Rose's ring as an alternative or additional ring, Emma declined. She said the vintage style wasn't really her taste, and she preferred her modern engagement ring. She did, however, express interest in having the ring reset, with a more contemporary design for use as a right-hand ring someday. I got engaged 6 months after Emma's wedding. My fiancé Michael, who was a fellow engineer I'd met through work, had proposed with a ring that was meaningful to both of us but modest in size due to our focus on saving for a house. When my mother offered me Grandma Rose's ring, I was overwhelmed with emotion. I had always loved that ring and felt such a deep connection to my grandmother's memory. It seemed perfect that I would be able to wear something so meaningful from the woman who had always understood and supported me. But my mother had conditions. She wanted me to have the ring appraised and insured immediately. She wanted documentation of its value and condition. She explained that it was important to protect such a valuable family heirloom. I understood completely and took the ring to a certified appraiser the following week. The appraisal came back at $12,500. The ring was even more valuable than we'd realized, with the platinum setting and the quality of the stones making it quite a substantial piece. I provided all the documentation to my mother, got the ring insured under my policy, and began wearing it proudly as my engagement ring. For 8 months, I wore Grandma Rose's ring every day. I felt connected to my family history and proud to be carrying on the tradition. Michael and I planned our wedding for the following spring, and I imagined walking down the aisle wearing the same ring my grandmother had worn on her wedding day. Then, 2 weeks before our wedding, everything changed. I had driven home for a final dress fitting and to help with last-minute wedding preparations. Michael was arriving the next day with his family. I was staying in my childhood bedroom, and it felt strange but comforting to be back in that space as I prepared for this major life transition. The morning of my dress fitting, I woke up and reached for my ring on the nightstand where I always placed it before sleeping. It wasn't there. I searched the nightstand, the floor around the bed, and the entire room. Nothing. I went downstairs and found my mother in the kitchen having coffee. I asked if she had seen my ring anywhere, explaining that I couldn't find it and was starting to panic. My mother's reaction was odd. She didn't seem surprised or concerned. Instead, she calmly told me that she had taken the ring back. I stood there processing what she'd said, certain I had misunderstood. I asked her to clarify what she meant by taking it back. She explained, in a matter-of-fact tone, that she had decided the ring was too valuable to risk something happening to it during the wedding festivities. She said she was concerned about me losing it or damaging it, and she thought it was better to keep it safe until after the honeymoon. This reasoning made no sense to me. I had been wearing the ring daily for 8 months without incident. I had proper insurance coverage, and taking someone's engagement ring 2 weeks before their wedding seemed like a cruel thing to do, regardless of the reasoning. I asked where the ring was so I could have it back immediately. That's when my mother dropped the real bombshell. She told me she had sold the ring. I couldn't process what I was hearing. I asked her to repeat what she'd said, certain I had misunderstood. She confirmed that she had sold Grandma Rose's ring to a jewelry dealer downtown for $11,000. She said the money would go toward wedding expenses and that I should be grateful for the financial support. I was speechless. I reminded her that this was my engagement ring, that I had been wearing it for 8 months, that we had discussed the family tradition and my connection to Grandma Rose's memory. I pointed out that she had never asked me if I wanted to sell the ring or if I would prefer the money instead. My mother's response was dismissive. She said the ring had always belonged to her, not to me. She said lending it to me temporarily didn't transfer ownership. She claimed she had never intended for me to keep it permanently and that I had misunderstood the arrangement. This was completely contrary to everything that had been discussed when Emma got engaged and when I got engaged. The ring was explicitly described as being given to daughters when they got engaged, continuing the family tradition. There had never been any mention of temporary lending or conditional ownership. I asked why Emma had been allowed to decline the ring and even discuss having it reset to her preferences if it was never actually going to belong to whichever daughter received it. My mother said Emma's situation was different because she already had an engagement ring she loved. The circular logic was maddening. Emma could decline the ring because she had another ring, but I couldn't keep the ring even though I didn't have another ring and had been wearing this one as my actual engagement ring for 8 months. I demanded to know the name of the jewelry dealer so I could attempt to buy the ring back. My mother refused to provide this information. She said the sale was final and that I was being unreasonable and ungrateful. The conversation escalated into the first real fight I'd ever had with my mother. I accused her of stealing my ring and ruining my wedding. She accused me of being entitled and materialistic. I pointed out that if money was needed for wedding expenses, she could have asked me first since I was making good money and could have contributed without selling irreplaceable family heirlooms. She said my wedding was already costing enough and that I should be thankful for any support instead of making demands. I left that conversation feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Nothing about my mother's actions or reasoning made sense, but I was 2 weeks away from my wedding, and I couldn't process the full implications of what had happened. I called Michael that night and told him what had occurred. He was as shocked as I was and offered to help me track down the jewelry dealer to attempt to recover the ring. But with wedding preparations in full swing and family arriving soon, we decided to address it after the honeymoon. The wedding day itself was bittersweet. I wore a simple band that Michael had quickly purchased to replace my engagement ring. Every time someone asked about my ring or made comments about wedding traditions, I felt the absence of Grandma Rose's ring acutely. My mother acted as though nothing had happened and seemed irritated whenever anyone mentioned the missing family ring. Emma, surprisingly, seemed uncomfortable when the topic came up. At one point during the reception, she pulled me aside and said she was sorry about what happened with the ring. She said she had tried to talk to our mother about it but hadn't been able to change her mind. This was the first indication I had that Emma knew about the sale in advance. After our honeymoon, Michael and I tried to track down information about the ring sale. We visited every jewelry dealer and pawn shop in my hometown, but no one had records of purchasing a ring matching that description from my mother. Either she had sold it somewhere else, or the dealers weren't being forthcoming with information. I attempted to have several more conversations with my mother about the ring, but each one ended in frustration. She maintained that she had every right to sell her own property and that I was being unreasonable. She refused to provide any details about the sale or to consider helping me recover the ring. What hurt most was the complete dismissal of the emotional significance of the ring. When I tried to explain how meaningful it was to wear Grandma Rose's ring, how connected I felt to family history and tradition, my mother would change the subject or accuse me of being overly sentimental. The ring incident created a permanent rift in my relationship with my parents. I started visiting less frequently and keeping conversations surface level. I felt like I couldn't trust them with anything important to me, and I began to notice other patterns of dismissive treatment that I had previously explained away. For instance, when Michael and I bought our first house 6 months after the wedding, my parents' response was lukewarm. They visited once, made some critical comments about our neighborhood choice and the amount we'd spent, and never seemed particularly interested in our accomplishment. When Emma and David bought their house the following year, a smaller house in a less expensive area purchased with significant financial help from both sets of parents, my parents threw them a housewarming party and talked constantly about how proud they were of the milestone. The pattern extended to career achievements as well. When I received a promotion to senior research scientist with a substantial salary increase, I called to share the news with my family. The conversation lasted about 3 minutes, with polite congratulations and quick subject changes. When Emma got promoted to senior marketing coordinator 6 months later, my mother organized a family dinner to celebrate and talked about Emma's career success for weeks. I started to understand that my relationship with my family was fundamentally different from Emma's and Jake's relationships with them. But I told myself that parents could love their children differently while still loving them equally. I tried to accept that my achievements weren't the type that excited my parents, and I focused on building my own life with Michael. This fragile peace lasted for about 2 years. Then Jake graduated from college and got engaged to his longtime girlfriend, Sarah. They announced their engagement at a family dinner, and I watched my parents' excitement with familiar feelings of being on the outside looking in. 3 days after Jake's engagement announcement, my mother called me with surprising news. She had found Grandma Rose's ring. According to my mother, she had been cleaning out some old jewelry boxes and discovered that she had never actually sold the ring. She claimed she had gotten confused and sold a different ring instead. She said she felt terrible about the misunderstanding and wanted to make things right by giving me the ring back. This explanation made no sense on multiple levels. My mother had specific details about the sale price and had refused to provide information about the dealer for 2 years. The ring had been professionally appraised, and she had seen the documentation describing its unique characteristics. It would have been impossible to confuse it with another piece of jewelry, but I was so desperate to have the ring back that I didn't push too hard on the logical inconsistencies. When I asked why she was returning it now, she said she realized how much it meant to me and wanted to repair our relationship. I drove home that weekend to retrieve the ring. When my mother handed it to me, I examined it carefully and confirmed it was definitely Grandma Rose's ring. I was overwhelmed with relief and gratitude, despite my confusion about what had really happened. I thanked my mother repeatedly and told her how much it meant to me to have the ring back. She seemed pleased with my reaction and suggested we put the whole misunderstanding behind us and move forward with a fresh start. For a few weeks, I felt like maybe our relationship could be repaired. I had my grandmother's ring back, and my mother seemed to be making an effort to be more supportive and engaged. I started calling more frequently and visiting more regularly. Then I overheard the conversation that changed everything. I had driven home for Jake's engagement party, which was being held at my parents' house. I arrived early to help with preparations and was carrying decorations from my car when I heard voices from the back patio. My mother was talking to my Aunt Linda, and I could hear them clearly through the open kitchen window. My aunt was asking about Grandma Rose's ring and whether my mother planned to offer it to Jake's fiancée Sarah when they got married. My mother laughed and said that wouldn't be necessary because Sarah already had a beautiful engagement ring. Then my aunt asked about the situation with me and the ring, saying she had heard there was some confusion about it around my wedding. What my mother said next made my blood freeze. She told my aunt that there had never been any confusion. She said she had intentionally sold the ring before my wedding because she didn't want me to have it. She said I had always been difficult and demanding, and she didn't think I deserved to wear Grandma Rose's ring. She said she had only pretended to find the ring and give it back to me because Emma had been pressuring her to make things right. My aunt seemed shocked and asked why my mother felt that way about me. My mother's response was devastating. She said I had always been the problem child, too serious and too focused on achievements that didn't matter to the family. She said I made everyone uncomfortable with my intensity and my need to prove I was better than everyone else. She said Emma was the daughter who brought joy to the family, while I brought stress and complication. Then she said something that still haunts me. She told my aunt that she had sold the ring because she wanted it to go to someone who would appreciate it properly, not someone who would just use it to show off how special they thought they were. I stood frozen in the kitchen, holding party decorations and listening to my mother destroy every assumption I had about our relationship. The ring hadn't been sold due to financial need or protective concern. It had been sold specifically to hurt me, specifically to deny me something meaningful, because she fundamentally didn't think I deserved it. But there was more. My aunt asked what had changed my mother's mind about giving the ring back. My mother laughed again and said she hadn't changed her mind at all. She said the ring I was wearing wasn't Grandma Rose's ring. She explained that after selling the real ring, she had taken the appraisal photos to a jewelry dealer who specialized in vintage reproductions. She had commissioned a replica of Grandma Rose's ring that was visually identical, but made with cubic zirconia stones and silver plating instead of diamonds and platinum. The replica had cost her about $300. She said she had given me the fake ring to stop Emma from complaining about the situation. She said I would never know the difference because I wasn't sophisticated enough about jewelry to distinguish between real and fake stones. She said she was proud of her clever solution that kept everyone happy. My aunt was horrified and asked what would happen when I eventually discovered the truth. My mother said that would probably never happen, and if it did, she would deal with it then. I quietly set down the decorations and walked back to my car in a daze. I sat in the parking spot for 20 minutes trying to process what I had just learned. Not only had my mother deliberately stolen my grandmother's ring to hurt me, but she had been actively deceiving me for months while I wore a fake ring and thanked her for her generosity in returning the original. The level of calculation and cruelty involved was beyond anything I had imagined possible from my own mother. I drove home without attending the engagement party. I called Michael from the car and told him I was sick and needed to leave immediately. He could hear in my voice that something was seriously wrong, but I couldn't explain what had happened until I got home. That night, I took the ring to an emergency jewelry appraiser who confirmed what I already knew. The stones were cubic zirconia, and the setting was silver with rhodium plating to mimic platinum. The ring was worth approximately $40 in materials. Michael was furious. He wanted to drive back immediately and confront my parents, but I needed time to think and plan my response. This wasn't just about a ring anymore. This was about a fundamental deception that revealed how my mother truly saw me and what she was willing to do to express her contempt. I spent the weekend researching my legal options and discovered that what my mother had done likely constituted theft and fraud. I had documentation of the original ring's ownership transfer to me, insurance records, and now proof that she had given me fraudulent goods while claiming they were the original item. But I also knew that pursuing legal action would completely destroy any possibility of family relationships in the future. I needed to decide whether I wanted justice or reconciliation, because I couldn't have both. On Monday morning, I called my mother and told her I needed to speak with her privately. I drove to my hometown that evening and asked her to meet me at a coffee shop near their house. I started the conversation by placing the fake ring on the table between us and asking her to explain what it was. My mother initially tried to maintain her story about finding the original ring. When I told her I had overheard her conversation with Aunt Linda, her whole demeanor changed. She became defensive and angry, accusing me of eavesdropping and violating family privacy. She said what she discussed with her sister was none of my business and that I had no right to listen to private conversations. I pointed out that she had been deceiving me for months and that her private conversations were affecting my life directly. I asked her to explain why she had sold the real ring and given me a fake replacement. What followed was the most honest conversation my mother and I had ever had, and it was devastating. She confirmed everything I had overheard. She said she had sold the ring because she didn't want me to have it. She said I had always been difficult and self-centered, and she didn't think I understood the value of family traditions. She said she gave me the fake ring because Emma was making her feel guilty, but she hadn't wanted to actually give up the money she'd received from selling the real ring. I asked her to explain what I had done to deserve this treatment. Her answer revealed decades of resentment I had never suspected. She said I had always acted like I was better than the rest of the family because of my academic achievements. She said I made everyone feel inferior with my career success and my focus on things that didn't matter to normal people. She said I never seemed to appreciate the things that were important to the family, like social relationships and shared experiences. She accused me of being judgmental about Emma's choices and Jake's interests. She said I had always been critical of their life decisions and had made them feel bad about their own achievements. This characterization of me was so contrary to my own self-perception that I initially didn't know how to respond. I had never criticized my siblings' choices. I had always tried to be supportive, even when I felt like my own achievements were being minimized or dismissed. I asked for specific examples of this judgmental behavior she was describing. She struggled to provide concrete instances, instead pointing to general feelings and assumptions about my attitudes. It became clear that my mother had constructed an entire narrative about who I was based on her own insecurities about my differences from the rest of the family. My academic focus had been interpreted as judgment of their choices. My career success had been seen as showing off rather than personal achievement. My attempts to excel had been viewed as attempts to prove superiority rather than efforts to make my family proud. The conversation lasted for 3 hours and ended with my mother demanding that I return the fake ring since I was clearly ungrateful for her efforts to make things right. I laughed and told her she could keep her $40 trinket. I drove home that night knowing that my relationship with my parents was irreparably damaged, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. The years of feeling like I wasn't good enough, like I was somehow failing to earn my family's approval, suddenly made sense. It wasn't about my behavior or my worthiness. It was about their inability to accept who I was and their resentment of my achievements. The next few months were difficult. I stopped attending family gatherings and limited my contact with my parents to brief, polite phone calls. Emma called several times asking why I wasn't coming to family events, but I wasn't ready to explain the full situation. Jake's wedding approached, and I struggled with whether to attend. Michael and I ultimately decided to go, but we stayed in a hotel and kept our interactions minimal. At the wedding, I watched my family dynamics with new awareness. I noticed how differently my parents interacted with Emma and Jake compared to how they interacted with me. I saw the subtle ways my contributions to conversations were dismissed or redirected. I observed how my achievements were downplayed while my siblings were celebrated. Most painfully, I watched my mother wearing Grandma Rose's ring. She had reset the ring in a more modern setting and was wearing it as her own ring. When people complimented it, she talked about how it had been her mother's ring and how much it meant to her to be able to wear it. She never mentioned that it had been intended for her daughters or that there had been any conflict over its ownership. Seeing her wear the ring that should have been mine at my brother's wedding, where I felt like a stranger in my own family, was the final confirmation that my decision to distance myself had been correct. After the wedding, I made a decision that changed my life trajectory. I applied for a research position at a pharmaceutical company in Switzerland. The opportunity would allow me to work on cutting-edge projects while experiencing life in Europe. It would also put an ocean between me and my family while I worked on healing from the trauma of discovering their true feelings about me. I got the position and spent the next 18 months in Basel, working on projects that were both professionally fulfilling and personally healing. The distance gave me perspective on my family relationships and helped me understand that the problem wasn't my worthiness, but their inability to appreciate who I was. During that time abroad, I also made a discovery that would later prove significant. While researching international pharmaceutical patent databases for work, I stumbled across a patent filing that included my father's name. Out of curiosity, I investigated further and discovered that my father had been quietly investing in small pharmaceutical companies for years, using information he gathered from my work conversations to make informed decisions. My casual mentions of promising research directions and industry trends had apparently been valuable enough for him to build a substantial investment portfolio around them. The portfolio was now worth over $200,000, and the investments had been made in my mother's name for tax purposes. My family had been profiting from my expertise and industry knowledge while simultaneously treating me as though my career was worthless and my achievements were meaningless. This discovery was both infuriating and liberating. It proved that my work had always been valuable and that my parents' dismissive attitude toward my career had been completely hypocritical. When I returned from Switzerland, I had a new perspective on my family relationships and a clear plan for how to move forward. I decided to give my family one opportunity to acknowledge what had happened and attempt to repair our relationships. If they were willing to take responsibility for their actions and demonstrate genuine change, I would consider rebuilding our connection. If not, I would maintain permanent distance with clear boundaries. I wrote a detailed letter to my parents explaining everything I had discovered, including their financial benefit from my career knowledge. I outlined the ways their treatment of me had been hurtful and unfair. I explained how the ring situation had revealed the depth of their resentment and deception. I offered them a choice. They could acknowledge what had happened, apologize genuinely, and commit to treating me with the same respect and consideration they showed my siblings, or they could continue to minimize and deny, in which case I would maintain minimal contact and exclude them from significant aspects of my life. I gave them 2 weeks to respond and made it clear that their response would determine the future of our relationships. Their response was disappointing but not surprising. My mother called and accused me of being manipulative and cruel. She said I was trying to destroy the family with my unreasonable demands and my refusal to forgive and move on. She said the ring situation was ancient history and that I was being petty and vindictive by bringing it up again. My father's response was even more revealing. He denied any knowledge of the ring situation, claiming my mother had handled all of that without his input. When I confronted him about the investment portfolio, he became defensive and angry. He said he had every right to make investments based on publicly available information, and if some of that information came from conversations with me, that was just smart business. Neither parent was willing to acknowledge any wrongdoing or commit to changing their behavior. Instead, they tried to make me feel guilty for holding them accountable and accused me of being unforgiving and destructive. Their response made my decision easy. I sent a final letter explaining that I would be maintaining minimal contact with them going forward. I would attend major family events like weddings and funerals, but would not participate in regular family gatherings or holidays. I would be polite, but would not pretend that our relationships were normal or healthy. I also informed them that any future financial benefit they gained from information related to my career would be considered theft, and I would pursue legal action if necessary. The letter was not sent in anger, but from a place of calm determination. I had given them an opportunity to choose our relationship over their pride, and they had made their choice clear. The next 2 years were challenging, but ultimately healing. I missed having a close family, but I didn't miss the constant feeling of being judged and found wanting. I didn't miss walking on eggshells or having my achievements minimized. Michael and I built strong friendships and created a chosen family of people who appreciated and supported us. We traveled, pursued hobbies, and focused on our careers without the emotional drain of trying to earn approval from people who were fundamentally unable to give it. During this time, my career continued to flourish. I was promoted to department head and began leading research teams on projects that would eventually result in breakthrough treatments for autoimmune diseases. My work was gaining recognition in the scientific community, and I was invited to speak at international conferences. Emma reached out occasionally, usually when she wanted something or when family events required my presence. Our relationship was polite but distant. She seemed to understand that things had changed, but wasn't interested in addressing the underlying issues. Jake was largely oblivious to the family dynamics and continued to treat me normally, which I appreciated. His wife Sarah was actually quite lovely, and I enjoyed their company when family situations brought us together. But it was my grandmother's ring that would ultimately provide the most satisfying resolution to this whole situation. 2.5 years after our final confrontation, I received an unexpected phone call from a jewelry dealer in downtown Chicago. He explained that he specialized in estate jewelry and vintage pieces, and he had acquired a ring that he thought might interest me. He described a 1940s Art Deco engagement ring with a central diamond surrounded by smaller stones in a platinum setting. When he showed me photos, I immediately recognized Grandma Rose's ring. The dealer explained that he had purchased the ring from another dealer who had bought it from a private seller several years earlier. He had been researching the ring's history because of its unique characteristics and had traced it back through several transactions. I asked if he could provide information about the original seller. He was reluctant at first, citing privacy concerns, but when I explained the family history and showed him photos of me wearing the ring, he agreed to share what he knew. The ring had been sold by my mother for $11,000 to a dealer in our hometown, exactly as she had originally claimed. That dealer had sold it to another dealer for $13,000, who had eventually sold it to the Chicago dealer for $15,000. The dealer was asking $18,000 for the ring, reflecting both its increased value over time and the markup typical in estate jewelry sales. I didn't hesitate. I purchased the ring immediately and had it authenticated by the same appraiser who had originally evaluated it for me. It was definitely Grandma Rose's ring, and it was finally back where it belonged. Wearing my grandmother's ring again felt like reclaiming a piece of my identity that had been stolen from me. But more than that, it felt like proof that sometimes the universe finds ways to restore what has been wrongfully taken. I decided not to tell my family about recovering the ring. It felt private and personal, and I didn't want to invite their drama back into my life. But 6 months later, the decision was taken out of my hands. Emma's marriage was struggling, and she had started calling me more frequently, seeking emotional support and advice. During one of these conversations, she mentioned that our mother had been acting strangely about jewelry lately, frequently checking and rechecking her jewelry box and asking Emma if she had seen various pieces. Emma suspected that our mother was worried about theft or loss, but the behavior seemed excessive and anxiety-driven. When Emma mentioned this to our father, he had dismissed her concerns and told her that our mother had always been particular about her jewelry. I realized that my mother had probably discovered that the fake ring I had returned to her was worthless and was now questioning whether other pieces in her collection were authentic. The paranoia about theft was likely fear that other people would discover her deception. The irony was delicious. My mother's own dishonesty had created a situation where she couldn't trust the authenticity of anything in her possession. A few weeks later, the situation came to a head in a way I never could have anticipated. Emma called me in tears, explaining that our parents were getting divorced. The divorce was apparently prompted by financial disagreements, but Emma was confused about the details and wanted my perspective on the situation. According to Emma, our father had discovered that our mother had been making unauthorized transactions from their joint accounts, including the sale of valuable jewelry without his knowledge. He was accusing her of financial deception and demanding a full accounting of all their assets. Our mother was counter-accusing him of making risky investments without her consent and hiding the profits from her. She had apparently discovered the pharmaceutical investment portfolio and was claiming that it represented marital assets that he had concealed. The divorce proceedings were becoming contentious, with both parents hiring lawyers and fighting over asset division. Each was accusing the other of financial misconduct, and both accusations were apparently accurate. Emma was devastated by the breakup of our parents' marriage and confused by the financial allegations flying back and forth. She couldn't understand how our parents had kept so many secrets from each other, or how their financial disagreements had become so serious. I found myself in the strange position of understanding the situation better than anyone else in the family, while also being the family member most removed from the drama. I explained to Emma that marriages require honesty and trust, and it sounded like our parents had been deceiving each other for years about important financial matters. I suggested that the current crisis might actually be an opportunity for both of them to build more authentic relationships based on truth rather than manipulation. Emma asked if I planned to get involved or try to help mediate the situation. I told her that our parents were adults who had made their own choices, and they would need to deal with the consequences of those choices. This was apparently not the response Emma had hoped for. She accused me of being cold and unforgiving, and said that family members should support each other during difficult times, regardless of past conflicts. I explained to Emma that supporting family members doesn't require accepting or enabling destructive behavior. I said that our parents had shown a pattern of dishonesty and manipulation that extended beyond their marriage to their relationships with their children. I told her about the ring situation and the investment portfolio, providing context for why I had distanced myself from them. Emma was shocked by the details of what our parents had done, particularly the elaborate deception involving the fake ring. She said she had known that our mother sold the original ring, but hadn't realized the extent of the manipulation that followed. She also admitted that she had been pressuring our mother to return the ring to me because she felt guilty about the whole situation. She said she had threatened to tell me the truth if our mother didn't find a way to make things right, which explained the timing of when the fake ring was offered. This conversation with Emma was actually healing for both of us. For the first time, she understood why I had distanced myself from our parents, and I understood that she had been trying to advocate for me in her own way. We agreed that our parents' divorce was unfortunate but not surprising given their pattern of mutual deception. We also agreed that as adult children, our job was not to fix their marriage, but to maintain healthy boundaries while they worked through their own issues. The divorce proceedings dragged on for 8 months, during which both parents reached out to me seeking support for their respective positions. I maintained neutrality and declined to get involved in their conflict. During this time, I made a decision that felt both generous and empowering. I reached out to my mother and offered to purchase the fake ring from her for the amount she had spent on it, plus interest. I explained that while the ring had no monetary value, it had sentimental significance as a reminder of an important period in my life. My mother was confused by this offer but agreed to the transaction. I think she was grateful for any gesture that felt like reconciliation, even though I was clear that purchasing the ring didn't represent forgiveness or a return to our previous relationship. I now own both the real ring and the fake ring, and both serve as reminders of different aspects of my journey towards self-worth and healthy boundaries. The divorce was finalized with an agreement that split assets relatively evenly after both parents acknowledged their respective financial deceptions. My mother kept the house and most of the jewelry, while my father kept the investment portfolio and his retirement accounts. Neither parent seemed particularly happy with the outcome, but both seemed relieved to be free from a marriage that had been built on mutual deception and resentment. In the years since their divorce, both parents have made attempts to rebuild relationships with their children. The approaches have been very different and have revealed important things about their capacity for growth and change. My father acknowledged his mistakes regarding the investment portfolio and apologized for profiting from my expertise without my knowledge. He has made genuine efforts to understand how his behavior affected me and has demonstrated respect for the boundaries I established. Our relationship is slowly improving based on honesty and mutual respect. My mother, on the other hand, continues to minimize what happened and expects forgiveness without accountability. She maintains that the ring situation was a misunderstanding and that I overreacted to normal family dynamics. She has not demonstrated any understanding of how her actions affected me or any commitment to changing her behavior patterns. As a result, my relationship with my father is gradually healing, while my relationship with my mother remains distant and formal. Emma has become more aware of family dynamics and has started setting her own boundaries with both parents. She's also made efforts to understand my perspective and rebuild our sibling relationship on more honest foundations. Jake remains somewhat oblivious to the deeper family issues, but has been supportive and kind throughout the family upheaval. His consistency and loyalty have been appreciated during a difficult time. Looking back on this whole experience, I've learned several important lessons about family relationships, self-worth, and the importance of authentic connections. First, love and manipulation are not the same thing. My mother's treatment of me was consistently dismissive and cruel, but it was disguised as protective concern or practical decision-making. Learning to recognize manipulation disguised as love has been crucial for my emotional health. Second, family relationships should be based on mutual respect and appreciation. The idea that blood relations automatically entitle someone to unconditional acceptance is toxic when it protects people from accountability for harmful behavior. Third, setting boundaries is an act of self-love, not selfishness. Maintaining relationships that consistently diminish your self-worth or require you to accept disrespectful treatment is not healthy or necessary, regardless of family connections. Fourth, achieving success and recognition outside the family can provide the perspective needed to recognize family dysfunction. When other people appreciate and value you, it becomes easier to see that family dismissal says more about them than about you. Finally, healing from family trauma is possible, but it requires honest acknowledgement of what happened and commitment to healthier patterns. Some family members will be capable of this growth, and others will not. Today, I wear my grandmother's ring with pride and gratitude. It represents not just family history, but my own journey towards self-respect and authentic relationships. The fact that it found its way back to me feels like validation that some things are meant to be, even when other people try to prevent it. My career continues to flourish, and Michael and I have built a life filled with people who appreciate and support us genuinely. We're expecting our first child next spring, and I'm excited to create a family environment based on unconditional love and acceptance rather than performance and competition. If you're dealing with family members who consistently dismiss your achievements, manipulate your emotions, or refuse to acknowledge harmful behavior, please know that you deserve better. You don't have to accept disrespectful treatment just because it comes from family members. Setting boundaries is scary, especially when it means accepting that some relationships may never be healthy or fulfilling. But protecting your emotional well-being and self-worth is always the right choice, even when it's difficult. Have you experienced similar family dynamics where your achievements were minimized while others were celebrated? Have you dealt with manipulation disguised as protective concern? How did you handle discovering that family members had been deceiving you about important matters? Your experiences and insights could help other people who are struggling with similar situations. Building a community of support and understanding is one of the most powerful ways to heal from family trauma and create healthier relationship patterns. If this story resonated with you, please share it with others who might benefit from hearing about boundary setting and family healing. Sometimes knowing that other people have survived similar situations and built fulfilling lives can provide the hope and courage needed to make difficult but necessary changes. Remember that your worth is not determined by other people's ability to recognize it. You deserve relationships that celebrate your achievements, respect your boundaries, and appreciate who you are authentically. Don't settle for less, even from family members who should know better.